This kind of reminds me of a scene from Ali G. Do you remember that? He used to have the four people sitting there, and then he would ask stupid questions. So here I go. Let's just posit that Trump was inherited a horrible hand. I mean, I did some reporting on this. At the end of the Biden administration, they kind of spent, I would say, the last 4 or 5 months, something like $300 billion, just pushed it out the door to try to get Kamala Harris elected. I mean, that's unprecedented largesse, unsustainable if you were going to do it for a long time. By the way, they did it with shorter term debt so they could keep rolling it over, not affect interest rates, not screw up the stock market. So we inherited this monstrosity, 30 trillion plus debt, a $2 trillion budget deficit. But here we are in the middle of a trade war. How do you get to the heart of debt, which we know is unsustainable long term? I think we know, unless there's any modern monetary theorists on the panel here, which I don't think so. How do we deal with a trade war when we have to deal with this debt? It seems like you're really defeating the purpose of dealing with the debt when you're dealing with a trade war. You're raising taxes on imports. You're going to essentially slow the economy, at least in the short term. You're the economist. Talk me out of this. This isn't a bad thing.
Well, no, I'll just summarize where we are in the depths of the ditch we've been thrown into. And so everything I'm going to report here is from mainstream economists. Right. The head of productivity in the country is Bob Gordon at Northwestern. So he's got a chart. Our productivity for the United States has been going down 70 years in a row. It's at 2% trend right now. That also goes along with CBO, Congressional Budget Office, growth rates forecast. We're going to grow at 2% for the next 30 years.
That's without the tariff war. Remember that?
Yes, that's without that. Right?
Okay.
And that's right. And then what undergirds productivity? 3 things: Harvard, Mankiw's famous paper, capital, human capital, and technological growth. So where do tariffs fit in? Capital. China has $100 trillion in capital to work with. We have $70 trillion. China's doing $5 trillion in manufacturing this year. The United States of America is doing half, $2.5 trillion. So somebody better fix something along the way here. And the fact that it's not going to be pretty in the short run, and I think it's going to be less ugly than people are saying in the news, right? The media is just one track, Trump derangement syndrome.
Right.
But you got to fix that piece. And then on the human capital, I'll just say the literacy rates. In our inner cities, in Chicago, right, it's 12% literacy rate for the poor kids in 3rd grade. And all I hear is the CEOs and the big firms, not the small business folks. We got workforce problems, Americans don't want to work. Well, maybe that's because you haven't invested in our kids in the inner city for the past 40 years. Right. And then technical growth, we're great, we're the envy of the world, but it's concentrated in Magnificent Seven. So that's where we sit, and it ain't pretty.
Governor Sununu, you look like you're scowling a little bit.
Yeah, it's all fixable. Don't let anyone tell you that the debt is a hard thing to manage. I'm really serious about this. 49 states have balanced budget amendments. Some do it well, some don't.
That is not the question. That's not the question.
No, the question is, but what we hear out of Washington all the time is, how do we wrap our arms around this? Somebody better do something. It's simply a matter of political will.
But then why are we starting with a trade war?
We're not starting with the trade war. We're ending with the trade war, right? This has been going on for 25 years. Republicans and Democrats alike refuse to actually take up doing what Congress's number one job is, which is balancing a budget, right? It should be an embarrassment to all the conservatives in here that the last president to balance a budget was Clinton, right? So we always have an excuse. We always have a reason to kick the can. Congressman was saying, right, I mean, you hit it right on the head. 9 years from now, we have a car crash of epic proportions when Medicare becomes insolvent, Social Security goes bankrupt, interest rate goes from $1 trillion a year to about $1.8 trillion that we'll just spend in interest, and our debt will hit about $45 trillion. That isn't we have to ramp down and make some tough decisions. That is a cliff. So if we start now and say, okay, we're going to wrap our arms around this, we're going to have the courage to talk about Social Security and Medicare, because they have to be fixed, guys. You can't balance a budget. And it's not politics, it's math. It's math, that's it. And so you have to make tough decisions. Trump is the first president to finally say, I'm going to start do something about this. I'm not going to wait for Congress and the Senate to slow roll me on it. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to lead, and hopefully Congress and some of the leaders on both sides will follow in his wake. And is a trade war part of it? Yeah, and it's going to be be bumpy, but guess what? It's gonna be fine. It's gonna work itself out.
Congressman McCormick, can you guys walk and chew gum at the same time? I mean, can you deal with the deficit, deal with this trade, whatever comes out of this? You know, we don't really know what the fiscal situation is going to be, and we'll know in about 2 months how bad it is. Do we get inflation? Do we get a slowdown? But can you guys walk and chew gum at the same time?
Some of us can.
I mean, you can, I'm assuming.
So the problem is it takes 3 to dissent to tank the big, beautiful bill. The problem is that you have some people that are going to draw the red line and sand with salt, other people with the debt, other people with whatever special interest that may came away from the old IRA that we're still spending money on. Do we have the will? The question is, how much leverage can the president put on us to do the right thing? But quite frankly, if you look at the overall effect of what we're doing right now, when we pledge to cut $1.5 trillion in the next 10 years, we're building additional debt per day of $4.4 billion per day. That's about a $1.5 trillion is how much we spend in excess every half a year. So this idea we're going to save 1.5 in 10 years, to me, is kind of a joke, because first of all, we're not going to be in control of the budget in a couple of years if we lose the midterms. So having a realistic conversation about what we're going to save this year and how we bend that curve, because quite frankly, this parabolic shift in debt started under our watch, George W. Bush in 2004, when we expanded healthcare dramatically in the Part D of Medicare. Where do we go from here? We have to be more accountable in the money we spend. We've taken over 90% of the expense of Medicaid. It's a state-run program, supposed to be in a balanced budget, but we have now taken on the propensity of it. It used to be the federal government was 1/3 of all government spending. Now it's 2/3. That's in short order. We forced physicians into a hospital system, much more expensive. We're having inflationary costs to everything we're doing that the government touches, and yet we keep on turning back to the government to solve the problem that the government created.
Right. Ms. Dixon, you I think admit you're kind of new to politics, right? In your one run, you were involved in small business. You hear all these professionals here that you're on stage with, and they're saying, we got to deal with the debt, but then we made a left turn into tariffs. You think that was a smart move?
I think I think there's 2 separate issues here. I think that we do have to get a hold of what's going on with trade, and we can't be taken advantage of. And we do have to be careful with China, because I come from manufacturing, I come from the steel foundry world, and I saw what China did to steel foundries. And I think this is something that a lot of people, I don't hear people come up on these panels and they go, man, you know what? Harvard doesn't have a metallurgical program. And that's where I go, we don't know how to make our own stuff anymore. So if we're gonna allow China to take over all of our manufacturing, and we go down to the point where we have 3 universities in the entire country that have a metallurgical degree, I say that, and young people today go, what is the word you just said?
But let me ask you this, what's a bigger priority? If we were, we prioritize our day all the time. You wake up, you do X, you do Y, get through the day. We prioritized trade, okay, in a 2% growth economy with $36 trillion in debt, $2 trillion budget. Was that a smart move?
I think that you have to be flexible with both. I think you have to understand that, right now we have been ruled by globalists who want to have global trade. They're not focused on the United States. We have no offense, but we have a Congress and a Senate, a House and a Senate right now that they're going in and they're making promises to all of their donors of what they're going to get.
But you can't do everything at once.
But
or can you? Maybe Donald Trump is,
Why are you limited? You have 535 people that can go in there and start actually having oversight. Why aren't they? Why don't you have a House and a Senate that goes in and says, my gosh, why are we funding diversity in the workplace in Serbia?
But that's good. They take that out. I'm just saying as a priority, and I want to, maybe Governor, let me just cut to the chase here. Should he have prioritized trade first and not looked at the deficit?
He did. So let's be fair. He prioritized the border.
Right.
Those are the first executive orders,
right.
which was hugely popular
Successful.
and critical.
And successful.
And then he prioritized efficiency in the government. It's called Doge and Elon Musk, and that dominated the headlines for a month. And he said, he said, in my first 100 days, I'm going to get to trade, because it was a passion of his for 40 years.
Right.
But he did a lot of other things. He did the DEI stuff. He did a lot of stuff. So you got to give him credit for doing so much. Finally, he gets to April 1st, and he set a date. And look, is it traditionally a conservative Reagan Republican ideal to raise tariffs? No, it's not. Let's cut to the chase. We should all agree on that. This is not quite within the Republican platform. But is it necessary? Yeah, I do think it is. I don't like the method. I don't like the messaging around it. I don't like the fact that it's not Trump. It was his team failed him.
Well, come on, it's not Trump.
His team gave him something that said we're going to put tariffs on an island with penguins. I mean, that was
Peter Navarro was taking the strings.
Navarro's an idiot. Peter Navarro's an absolute fool. And Ludnick has
he's not here to defend himself.
Well, I will. I'll defend him.
He'll be on TV tonight, I'm sure. Talking about himself. No, but his team failed. Trump's team failed him in the method and the way it was rolled out.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be a failure of a policy. He's going to fight this trade war with China. He's going to get victories with pretty much every country on the planet that no president has been even willing to take on. So let's give him credit for going after something that everyone else has been too chicken to deal with.
I think that's key. No one else has been willing to do this. So it's easy to sit here and say, gosh, he's doing it wrong. Well, we have never seen it done before. But he is willing to step out. And he's also not afraid to say, we're going to pull back on this, and we're going to tweak this, and we're going to change it. And that's kind of how he has been president. He was president that way in the first term, when people would come to him and say, hey, this doesn't work. Okay, well, let's tweak it. Politicians don't do that.
So art of the deal, you're saying?
I think that's very...
Or is he winging it? We don't know.
I think that part of the deal is also figuring out... I mean, people call it winging it because you're figuring out how it goes as you go along.
By the way, you do okay winging it. Let's get to Dave, and I want to get the congressman.
It's been about 3 weeks, and everyone's talking about traditional Republicanism.
Can you defend Peter Navarro before we get sued?
Yes, well, that's what I'm about ready to do. And so when it comes to trade, we talk about having free markets. I've talked to a bunch of very successful, wealthy people and say, and I asked them, can we do free trade with China, a totalitarian surveillance state that's communist and doesn't use a price system, right? So free markets means you have working markets, right? So can you free trade with a communist? The answer is no.
Right.
Can you have free trade with the Magnificent Seven firms who are all monopolies? In a chapter 1 of basic economics, you got a lot of firms in the supply curve. That's what it means to have competition. So again, there's no competition, there's no free markets. And then the G20, when it comes to trade, the top 20 richest countries in the world all have 200 to 300% tariffs against us. 200 to 300% higher than us.
You're absolutely right.
Is that free trade? No. So the traditional Republicans put us in a ditch, and I was one of them. But now you got to learn, and Trump.
I want to get this to the congressman. How many ditches can you really dig yourself out of? And let me just make one. Because there is a priority.
You really want to limit it.
But here's the thing. Let's kind of get it back to the topic at hand. Trade is great, and it's on everybody's mind. But convince me, Congressman, that Trump even cares about the deficit and the debt. And here's why. Here's why I say this. Pre-COVID budget deficit. Listen and learn. No, I'm only kidding, but excuse me, getting a little snotty here. Pre-COVID budget deficit, $1 trillion, right? During COVID, it went up to 3. Crazy Joe Biden moved it down in an expanding economy to 2. So, again, but still, $1 trillion is nothing to sneeze about. That was a Trump budget deficit. During COVID, there was a lot of spending in there that people questioned, but a lot of spending. Even as he was leaving office, he kicked money out the back door. Convince me he cares about this.
Well, remember, it's not the president who determines the budget. It's Congress by.
No, but he pushed for this stuff.
So to be fair, though, we Republicans have gone along with this since the very get-go. We Republicans as a body, that's why I got elected, I thought, is because I'm supposed to come up there and give accountability. Now, the question is, as we make more promises about what we're going to give tax breaks to, everybody wants to have advantages. I know people don't want to pay taxes on tips or on Social Security, on overtime, on certain amounts, or certain, and unfortunately, everybody wants the same advantages, and we don't apply evenly, which I think the Constitution is supposed to do. We're all supposed to have the same applicable taxation rates, the same burden, so that one people don't pay for another people. I don't think the way we're going about it right now is the right way. When you talk about President Trump caring about the deficit, I was very critical about that $1 trillion debt, and that we haven't done anything to really curb it at all. And quite frankly, if you look at it, the last president that had a serious consequential budget to cut debt,
Bill Clinton?
I'd say Calvin Coolidge, actually.
Who?
About 100 years ago.
Well,
He gave
Bill
you a $3
Clinton,
billion.
no, let's give crazy Bill Clinton his due.
But remember, that was a Republican Congress, and it was mixed, and it was
Right.
a much better time economically.
No, it was before the Republican Congress. I mean, I'm not in favor of tax increases, but I remember the budget that Bob, and you remember this, Bob Rubin, Clinton, they raised the upper rate. Bob Rubin said, if you don't put it into budget deficit reduction, the bond market will rebel. Bill Clinton then famously said, are you telling me a bunch of effing bond traders control the U.S. economy? And Bob Rubin said, yes. He put it into the budget. And, it set the stage for what we had was budget surpluses.
So let's look at when the huge spending curves happened. Obviously, the Great Depression. 2008 was another huge one, right? To buy out the
bailouts, the bailouts.
And then COVID was the next one. The problem with the COVID one compared to all the other times is we forgot to come back down. And here we are still at CRs ever since COVID, passing the same budget we had during COVID instead of coming back down. We have not gotten to the point where we had the stomach to do the right thing.
So if we went back to the pre-COVID Trump budget, you think we could balance the budget in 10 years?
Absolutely. 100%, 1,000%. We have no doubt. If you look at the curve and where our GDP keeps on growing, it may not be 2% all the time, but at a consistent rate, where we do pretty well, we're a $27 trillion economy, and we kept those same spending levels, and we didn't have them. And right now, realize that if we bring the military spending to non-discretionary spending, which is what we're talking about right now, 90% of our budget would be non-discretionary, what we call mandatory spending. How do you recover when you're voting on less than 10% of the vote? The budget is based on discretionary. You can wipe out that. We're 30% in debt every single year. That will not touch it.
Do you see that happening? You're in Congress.
No way. That's the problem, is we haven't even had a serious consequential conversation about getting rid of the IRA, let alone getting back to pre-COVID spending levels. And that's a bipartisan issue, by the way.
Okay, let me raise this question. I'm going to start with Dave because he's an economist. I remember, because I'm old, Graham Rudman Hollings, right? There was that whole thing about balancing the budget deficit back in, I guess that was end of Reagan, early H.W. Bush. Never really happened, or it happened marginally. So we've been dealing with this whole problem of debt and deficits for a long time because allegedly Armageddon is supposed to come, but it's never coming. Is this just in our heads? I mean, maybe the Fed could just keep buying our debt. I mean, I'm just trying to say, we've been crying about this for years, and you wonder why the public, it kind of goes over everybody's head because there's never really any consequence.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, we were joking before we got going. The debt for this, well, some of you are senior with me, you have gray hair. We're spending all the money. So for us, it's fine and dandy. And fighting the Democrats, all political views are my own, is like fighting Santa Claus, right? They want to spend forever. So when our team says we got to be, fiscally responsible here, that's a problem. So Armageddon is here, except for modern monetary theory. We just printed money, and like Liz Truss.
So does it work? Does the Fed buying the debt work? Because it looks like it is.
It's working until it doesn't work. But when it doesn't work, then the U.S. Treasury bond, for the first time in history, is insolvent, and that you don't want to see. That brings you to fishing under a bridge like Frodo. Right? You with me on that one? If we ever
not
default,
really, but go ahead.
I'll
roll with it.
If we ever default on a dollar,
well, I know
the Treasury is, and that's the problem. If it ever does, and these guys just raised the host of issues: Social Security, Medicare, and the debt, and defense. And if China attack, you just add a few things. You don't even need to add them in. It's Armageddon.
I don't want to be channeling Bernie Sanders, but I think it's fun to go there.
And I have to add one other sentence. It's
right.
all because of you and the media. It's all your fault.
Just blame me.
If we could educate the American people on these issues, and that not you, you're very good at covering them.
Thank you.
But if the mainstream media would cover any of these issues related to Armageddon, it might help.
Well, we cover it all the time. It just never happens. There was a debt clock in New York City, as I recall. It's gone now. It's still.
You're defending the mainstream media?
You know why the debt clock is gone? Because Armageddon never happened. What do you think about this? Where's the consequence to all this spending? There is none.
Well, there is some. There will be some. and that will happen to my generation, to Dave's point. It'll be and our kids' generation that will come, and there will
But wait, they said that 20 years ago. And then we got the generation that's not paying for
You
it.
were the one that was just a few minutes ago pointing out this is the worst.
I'm just plain devil's advocate.
I know,
okay?
but there is truth in the fact that suddenly this, and you think of how quickly the jumps, I mean, look, you go from the Great Depression to 2008 to 2020, those are a lot closer. You suddenly have these crises coming up faster, and the spending is going up at numbers that we have never seen in a shorter period of time. So yeah, suddenly that's going to break. And that's what you see politicians talking about. And I think that's what you saw Donald Trump talking about in the first term. But you said, oh, well, he was different then. COVID hadn't hit. Nobody could foresee that. And so when suddenly the spending goes through the roof and then Joe Biden comes in, and Joe Biden's not really there, other people are just spend.
That is true.
And then we're completely out of control. So Donald Trump comes back in. And the funny thing is Donald Trump comes back in, he's like, we're going to stop this spending and we're going to start to dig into what we are spending on the ground here that we don't need to be spending. And people go crazy.
Governor Sununu, I remember when your dad was talking about
You just dated yourself, my friend. Now the gray hair makes sense.
Trust me, I'm old. I used to watch your dad on Crossfire, and I loved him. When he was talking about runaway deficit, debt, the whole thing. But that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, so,
Again,
so let's get to the
where
heart of
is
your
the
question.
consequence?
The consequence is because the genealogical dynamics of this country are changing, which means as you get this older, the boomers are getting older, as healthcare gets more expensive, that's the Medicare crisis, right? We didn't have that for 20, 30 years. We kept drawing it down, but it's literally going to go bankrupt.
So you call it the so-called fiscal cliff.
That fiscal cliff happens at the exact same time as the Social Security cliff hits, right? And the exact same time that, again, our interest payment alone goes from 1 trillion to about 1.5, 1.6. So all these things, unfortunately, are going to happen at the same time. And you can just, it's math. You can just see it all coming. So it's been easy to kick the can down the road. And I'm not blaming everyone. You brought up the idea of bringing back a budget to pre-COVID. So Rand Paul proposed that bill in the Senate. He got 4 Republicans to support him.
Okay.
4 Republicans supported that actually very good idea of just starting there. And by the way, you don't have to end there. But to your point, let's start having the conversations, right? You're fighting for it. Certain folks are fighting for it. My argument is you need Democrats. If your only way to do something hard is to do it simply by party, you got to give a little to get a lot. You have to find a way to do that. I'm going to give you my New Hampshire example. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I'm a politician. It's what I do best. I have 400 members in my House of Representatives when I was governor. At one point, it was 201 Republican to 199 Democrat. I got a balanced budget with tax cuts and school choice approved in a voice vote, the first vote. Why? Because I gave the Democrats a little stuff over here, but I took the big wins over there. No one's even willing to have that conversation in Washington. But understand, you're never going to get 60 votes in the Senate. Neither side is. So you better figure out a way to do this stuff without 60 votes.
Congressman, I'm sure you have some Democratic colleagues you speak to. You speak to a few of them?
I do, and as a matter of fact, if you're going to talk about Social Security, which we've been insolvent about 7 years, automatic 21% cut. Automatic, we won't vote on it, by the way. And Medicare, in about 9 years, 8 years, will also become insolvent. 11% cut, automatic. We won't vote on it. Which means the only way we solve it is a knee-jerk reaction of increasing dramatic amount of debt. At the same time, where our interest rate goes up because we can't borrow, which goes to your point, now we have a catastrophic event where we can't issue treasury notes that people are going to buy. All these things, this next president, this could be golden age of politics for 4 more years. But the question is, are we setting ourselves up for failure knowingly? Knowingly, and this is the problem. We do have bipartisan solutions to Social Security, where you can increase, let's say, anybody who's receiving it or close to receiving it 10 years away, you don't get touched. And everybody's about, okay, that's okay. But anybody who's 10 years away, we decided by 6 months. And if you're 15 years, a year, and then so on forth, and then take away the $164 million cap, which nobody wants to talk about. I know that's an attraction because I get it. But if you want to have a realistic conversation, give me a better idea. It has to be a compromise. It has to be.
Let me ask you this.
And I'm as far right as you get.
Yeah.
But if you don't include the Democrats in this, we will be grandma pushing off the cliff.
Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, you speak to people in the Trump administration. Not just do they appreciate this debt fiscal cliff we're heading to, Are they going to do anything about it? How would you rate it? Give me 1 to 10. As 10, definitely going to rate, definitely going all in. 1, they don't care.
In this big, beautiful bill, that will not be addressed at all. First of all, it's against the bird rules, which is the Senate rules that means you can't touch certain things. But we will have to address it.
When?
We'll have to address it within the next years, because chances are every midterm you lose 20 seats in Congress. If we lose 3, we're in the minority. Math.
But how do you address it without dealing with Social Security and Medicare and everything?
If we're going to do it, we have to literally say we're willing to lose the majority. We're probably going to lose the majority anyways. Why not do the right thing? This is the thing. Really hard though to convince somebody from New York who's
Now that's a news headline. You think we're going to lose it, and we're going to deal with it?
Statistically, but once again, you talked about the tariffs, and actually I'll take a very bullish. I was very critical. I don't like tariffs at all. But if India is going to give you 13 to 15%, we're going to give you 2 to 3. Why not get what we can? We have 70 countries who are willing to go 0-0 with us. That could actually be a huge benefit for us. This could be Trump playing chicken but wins. If he wins, wow, this could be a huge boom for America, and we actually come out way on top. So I think even a little bit of instability right now, it's just like stock market.
So you think we should go all in with deficit reduction, even if it costs us the midterms and
I think
spending cuts?
We are probably going to lose midterms regardless. Why not do the right thing? If you do the right thing, whether educational choice, certificate of need, all these things that we're scared of losing.
Now, do you think he's going to do it?
It will become. We will be the popular.
Okay, will he do it?
I'm willing to do it.
No, will the president do it?
It's Congress, remember.
Well, he
Right.
leads. He's the leader of the party.
Will he use his leverage to change it?
Yes.
I have not seen it in Social Security yet because it's a scary thing. I hope he does. I will encourage him to do it.
Or Medicaid or anything, all the big ticket items.
Medicaid, yes. We are going to tackle. There is a ton of waste, fraud,
interesting.
abuse, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of fraudulent payments, upcoding. I'm an ER doc by trade. Believe me, this stuff drives me crazy. We can fix a lot of this. And by the way, Medicaid needs to be pushed back to the states where they actually balance their budget. When you have us paying the lion's share, 90% of a bill, why would they want to?
Well, that's definitely a start. Ms. Dixon, you want to get in here, but I also want to ask you a question. Why don't we just bite the bullet right now and raise taxes and cut stuff? Why would that not be a way to deal with the fiscal?
So we just mask the problem.
I don't like it.
Why not just mask the problem? Just make the people pay more. Because the people
you're gonna deal with the deficit and protect the future that you talk about, your kids and everything, so they don't get stuck with debt.
Yeah, so I don't want them to have a massive amount of taxes and not be able to have a home and not be able to have their own children. There is a reality that we are overspending. We are overspending and nobody's looking at it. So if you do that, what does that solve? You don't have to have any self-reflection at all. And Donald Trump can only do so much. Let's remember that an executive order is only good until he's not president, right? And so that does fall on Congress. And that's why there needs to be 4 years. And I don't believe that we can just say, we'll get it all done in the next few months and then we'll lose the midterms. Everybody has to be out there focused on the midterms, and we've got to change the way we budget. That has to come from Congress. It cannot be that Donald Trump writes executive orders and we stop things for a while and we go right back to status quo, which is just wild.
But he can lead on it, can't he?
Pardon me?
Can't he lead on it? I mean, that's what he does.
Absolutely, of course, and I believe that he will, but he needs to have the majority there, and there is 4 years.
Well, we got a majority.
There's more than 4 years worth of work here right now. You say he's going so fast on these tariffs, and this is crazy. But
I didn't say it was crazy. I just said he's going fast.
I could see your eyes.
You have good eyesight because I'm wearing glasses, and then you got the lights.
I know what's happening. But I know that there's a lot of people out there going, this is different than anything we've ever seen. But you have to understand, my generation and my kids' generation, my kids are like now, they're watching this. They're in high school. They're in middle school. They see more things than I ever saw when I was that age. And they're saying, how could we continue to just wildly spend our money? And when we're going to be adults...
But that's not my question. My question is, why don't we just bite the bullet, cut the budget, and raise taxes? And let me ask you that.
Because that's the California model, and it's a freaking disaster.
No, but they never cut the debt.
That's because you need growth. Because you don't want to chase everyone out of your country and all your capital back into Europe.
You think
you need a growth model to be part of this. You can't do it with taxes.
Listen, I just want you to know that Bernie Sanders has literally taken over my soul right now. And I'm trying to be provocative here. Obviously, I don't agree with a lot of stuff.
You're not the devil's advocate. You're the communist advocate.
The devil is in the advocate, okay? But my point is, you're saying we can grow ourselves out of this a little bit, but it's never really worked, has it?
Sure, of course.
Where have we grown ourselves out of a budget deficit?
Look, you've seen states that have grown. You look at Tennessee, look at Mississippi. These states that have brought manufacturing in, and they've grown themselves out of this. Look at the opposite. Look at California. Look at Michigan. Look
New
at
York.
Illinois.
Look at my home state. What did
You mentioned Clinton.
Clinton
That was
in the
during
90s,
a
yeah.
great growth. You watched the quote during that period. By the way, that was Newt Gingrich, my predecessor,
The architect of all of it.
the architect of the contract to America. But you do have to control spending. But if you increase taxes, we've shown over and over and over again in macroeconomics that you increase taxes, your revenue actually goes down because people start hiding their money individually and as a business. When we cut the tax rate to 21% corporate tax, what happened? We had an increase in revenue. That's a good thing, and you provide more people because you don't want to have a society used to giving things to them. That's not good for your soul. That's not good for your anxiety, your depression. You have to have a reason to live, and it is to provide for your family, not to get stuff given to you. This is good for America in so many different ways to actually have a flowing, growing economy that produces a revenue that we can spend with responsibility.
And again, I would argue if you're ever going to get to the point where you're encouraging more money to the government, you have to do it after the government accepts the guardrails of a balanced budget amendment that codifies it. That says no matter how much money you give us, we're always going to play within the rules of balancing the numbers. Now, I'm going to be self-promoting again. There's been an effort in the states since Reagan started this, right, to pass a constitutional amendment that forces Congress to balance the budget. How many states do you need for states to pass a constitution? 33, right? 27 have already signed on, guys. South Carolina is probably going to pass theirs in the next couple of weeks. So if Congress doesn't get their act together, we're only 4 or 5 states away from the states, right? This whole thing called federalism. Remember, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. States have the power to force Congress to do it.
That was one of my questions. I'm glad you brought it up. The balanced budget amendment. I keep hearing about this. It comes, it goes, it usually goes. Why does it keep going?
No, that would be great, but once the states figure out what the consequences are, they're going to have a heart attack too, right? It sounds great, balanced budget.
Okay, but let's do it on the federal level.
Hey, let me just finish the half-sentence answer. That entails right now cutting $2.5 trillion per year. So in the 10-year window, that would be a $25 trillion cut. So you can say balanced budget amendment, but that's what it means. And I got Virginians freaking out over this minimal stuff, some reductions in jobs or whatever at the federal level. And what are we going to do? And energy costs are going to go up 3 to 5%, whatever, even though the data are going down on that. And so the entitlements, and we got an MIT math guy down here. I saw that resume. So we got some smart people on this panel with math, and the congressman and Tudor. And
I went to University of Missouri, so don't put me in that.
The original entitlement programs, right? It doesn't require Einstein to fix it. The average death age was 65 when they were all put in, right? And so now the average death age is about 84, right? So there's your problem. So there are rational ways of having a dialogue with the American people, but the problem is you got to hold the Democrats accountable somehow in public. I mean, they are against all 3 of the top issues of the Trump thing, right? The forever wars, the border invasion, the inflation,
Doge,
and the budget deficits and all these issues. And somehow, you're right, we got to get the Democrats in, but I have no idea. They used to.
You want to know how to do it? Immigration reform. You offer them something, a conservative immigration reform bill, or something like
You're
that.
getting me nervous.
No, you got to find your issue. You got to find their issue and do it in a conservative way to give them their win.
So wait a second.
While we secure the
So
financial.
your solution is we'll let 20 million illegals.
No, that's not what I said at all. That's not.
But that's what they want.
No, you find a way to make the ports bigger in a streamlined system or whatever it is. But you can do everyone agrees you need some sort of bill, right? So do a conservative immigration reform bill. And how many Democrats do you need? Not many. Guys, you need 20 of them out of a couple hundred, right? You don't need many of them to get on board to get your big wins that really secure the future of this country. So there are conservative ways to do it. And to your point, the clock's ticking, right? We got 2 years, maybe 4, but probably not. To actually do conservative things in a smart way, you give a little, you get a lot.
So we don't really need a balanced budget amendment, right, Congressman, when it really comes down to it?
Well, let's just talk reality. We're not going to get a balanced budget amendment anytime soon because even though it sounds like, 2/3 state, it's really difficult.
It's really hard. It's really hard.
You start to blink really hard when certain states realize, then I have to pay the bill. That balanced budget that my state has goes away really quick because remember, The federal government used to pay 1/3 of all government spending. We're 2/3 now. If I take 1/3 of the government spending out of all the economy, of all things that benefit every state, all of a sudden those states go, all of a sudden my budget's not balanced. Now I have to increase tax. Now I lose my job as a state legislator, as a governor. And I think it sounds great on paper, but the reality of it is the bipartisan things we need to tackle are the biggest spending items. 76% of the budget right now is non-discretionary spending. That's Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The biggest spending item is healthcare. If we don't have some bipartisanship buy-in, and this is where the bipartisanship comes in, the Social Security one that I just mentioned, Medicare and Medicaid, when I have those discussions, they always like to vilify us. And this is the problem, right? We got to win an election. So I have to make you evil, me good, and so we don't solve the problem. But if I say, look, we're all going down together unless we solve this. And the last time we revised Social Security, by the way, in the 80s, I think 87,
right.
Nobody lost their job over it. It was a bipartisan solution. It saved Social Security, and nobody lost their election over it.
I'll give you
Just
one practical.
could you let her get?
Yes.
I think that you have to remember that everybody up here, you guys have an inside track. You see this from a different perspective. I mean, Elon Musk was saying we should let the American public review these bills for 9 days before anybody actually votes on them. Why? Because we don't see them. We don't understand what you're looking at every day. We don't understand. The American people are hearing this, and we're frustrated, and you're making these great points of, well, are the states going to take this on? But it's the people who should actually have the voice, and they don't know what's happening in government.
So let me ask you this. If you were elected governor of Michigan, would you have put to a referendum a balanced budget amendment? I mean, was that something you were thinking of?
Well, you have to have a balanced budget in the state of Michigan.
Well, do you? Is it balanced by GAAP or is it balanced by cash?
You have a...
They're balanced on a gap basis. But
You sure about that? Most states are balanced on cash.
No. So
I could be wrong.
Every state balances. Now, some states do it really badly. The example is California, right? They tax people. They do all this crazy stuff, and they jack up their revenue projections. But it's actually within the confines.
That's what you're seeing in the state of Michigan right now, because the budget has increased almost 50% since Whitmer took office 6 years ago. So you're seeing suddenly everything is going up. So hunting license.
I don't trust her accounting for some reason. That's why I say this.
That's why she's cuddling Trump, right?
You're right.
But it is. But we feel it, and that's why when you asked me about, well, can't we just raise the taxes? Look, we see this every day, and it's raising taxes.
Just so you know, I just want you to know, because you're giving me the evil eye here. I'm here to elicit answers so we can advance the debate. If you know anything about me, I'm for zero taxes and I cut everything. Just so you know.
I know you're playing devil's advocate, but I'm saying I'm coming from I go to register my car. My car registration costs me 5 times what it costs in Florida. And you know what? The Nancy Pelosi's and the Gretchen Whitmers of the world are like, that's pocket change. But it's not to me. And it's not to most of the people in Michigan. So we see it. And when he says, well, people are just leaving those states. If you raise taxes, you lose population. We see it. You see it in your state. So when the people are hearing these folks talk about, gosh, we could try to do this, and we could try to have this balanced budget. We could try to take the budget to a different direction. We don't get to see the inside track of what's actually, where is the spending? And then you hear Elon Musk come out, and he's like, we're spending, $1 million here, and $25 million here, and $1 billion here. It's not even close to $1 trillion. These are numbers we can't even manage in our minds. They're so big. So I think a lot of the American people thought Doge was going to go in there and we'd be like, wow, all of this crazy spending. And it doesn't come close to the numbers that we're spending. So
they won't let him near the big ticket items, obviously, right? I mean, if Elon had his way with Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, we'd be talking differently. I think he's doing a great job. Just my opinion, if he saves $100 billion, that's really good stuff, because it's $100 billion that we didn't have. You're the economist here. So let me ask you this. I noticed I was eating dinner at a restaurant I think it was on a Tuesday night in early April, and my phone is ringing off the hook, and so my source is saying, have you seen the 10-year bond? 10-year note spiked the interest rate to 5%. This was right before the pause. The pause came the next day for obvious reasons. We had a seizing up of the bond market where it looked like, it reminded me of 2008, right after Lehman, just as someone who covered it. Bond market is really the plumbing of the U.S. economy. It's more important than the stock market. If the lending markets don't work, guess what? You don't get a paycheck because your company floats commercial paper to pay you. It doesn't have the money on hand. It hits the bond markets. And that all was seizing up right there. That, to me, was the sort of canary in the coal mine about debt. Now, that was seizing up because people were like, we don't know what's going on with trade. We don't know what Trump's doing.
Yeah.
And foreigners were obviously dumping our debt.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening over a similar situation if we don't get our hands around what's going on here
if
fiscally?
we don't, but the BRICS and all that conversation on the reserve currency is overblown. Who's going to park their money in Brazil or India or whatever?
How about Bitcoin?
I'm not going to, but let me get back. You guys always like the interesting stories. But let me get back to the Federal Reserve, which is where I was going to go.
Or gold. Gold is up, by the way, gold is up tremendously right now.
That's volatility and all that. So that's all fine. But the Federal Reserve, let's go back to your years, right? So they printed too much money in 04, 05. This is John Taylor. You get the bubble, 07, 08 blows up. The Federal Reserve comes in talking about incomprehensibility, floods the zone, bails out Wall Street and the banks. Kept roughly a 0% interest rate regime in for a decade,
right,
and a near zero for almost 2 decades. And so 5% is nothing. That's normal, unless you have an out-of-whack Federal Reserve Bank. Now, why does this matter? Because the Federal Reserve...
So you think we could handle a 5% handle on a 10-year?
Yes. If you have rationality and a Fed that's got a true concern for prices and jobs, right? That's their dual mandate only. They've been messing around
But
with
remember,
politics.
5% now is on $36 trillion in debt.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get...
Governor Sununu, will you be, if you were to...
I got to finish. The key punchline here is the Federal Reserve accommodated the $2 trillion deficits for the last 6-7 years. They printed the money to accommodate the spending. They accommodated the money printing in the election
That's
of
the Fed.
Joe Biden.
The Fed went in there and bought the...
Now Trump wants a little easing because there's a little volatility out there due to trade. So a rational Fed, if it wasn't political, would say, all right, I see some rough seas. They're a little choppy out there. I'll print a little extra money to get us through this period to be fair. No. And so the Federal Reserve, they need to be disciplined, right? They have allowed us to get into this debt level, and no one understands. It's called secrets of the temple for a reason, right? The Federal Reserve Bank is the secrets of the temple. And it shouldn't be a temple that cracked the front door open and let the sun...
I hate to get too wonky here, but it does matter what the 10-year does.
Yeah, no, I got it.
Because mortgage rates are priced off the 10-year. The 10-year hits 5% on 30, I think I got the number right, 36 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
It's down to about 4.2 now, but yeah.
32, did you say?
4.2. It's come down since.
Right, it popped today. Yeah. If you were the Treasury Secretary, would you be worried about this right now?
Look, my sense is I would be worried and concerned. I think what's going to happen is we have about 60 days left on Trump's 90-day clock. I mean, let's give the president a lot of credit. Politicians normally don't do this. He gave himself a time window to get something done. And 90 days is not a lot of time to renegotiate 70 deals. Technically, you can't do it. But if he gets nothing done in that 90 days, the market and the bonds are going to be worse than they were on April 2nd. It's going to be a disaster. But he will get some of it done. It'll restore some confidence. And my sense is the Fed will cut a 1/4 point sometime this summer and maybe even another 1/4 point maybe later this fall, something like that, to show a vote of confidence and being a partner in stabilizing the economy. But if they sit on the sidelines too long, they're going to be seen as almost an enemy of the economy. They have to show that they're in a partnership here to actually work with policy to get the right balance to get an on-ramp here.
Congressman, do you look at the 10-year bond at all? Do you sit there and worry about it? Do people in Congress say, the 10-year is up at 5% today, we've got to...
Of course I do.
We got to meet.
And since the establishment of the Federal Reserve, which was, by the way, just down the street from here, Jekyll Island, right? The creature from Jekyll Island now has become the monster of debt. And if you look at the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal, nor is it reserve, and where the money goes. and if you read that book, I highly recommend that book. It was the first book that was ever recommended to me when I ran for politics. I read it. At first, it'll make you kind of mad, and then it'll kind of actually scare you. Because you realize the real power players, the people who control the trillions of dollars of debt, and where that money and where that benefit goes, then you start to realize where the puppet strings are, and why world wars, and why and he actually predicted that they would use the climate crisis for a reason to overspend, because of course we can't have the end of the world, right? We have to spend money or carbon will take over the world. That 0.04% of the atmosphere will ruin us. And even though we only produce, 0.000167% of the atmosphere's carbon, that's going to somehow, we're going to spend $5 trillion on that and we're going to solve that problem? No. This is another ploy that he predicted. What he didn't predict was another emergency, which we called COVID. There's always another emergency to borrow more money to spend on that somebody's benefiting from. That somebody is what you got to be concerned about, and that's what we have to be savvy to defeat.
I'm not going to bore you with the 10-year bond question, but I will ask you this about Doge. Outside looking in, you come from middle America. What do people think about Doge? Do they like it? Do they hate it? Do they think it's a waste of time? And because the numbers are coming back very, let's say, men's amends, as my mother would say.
Well, it's interesting because when I look at the numbers in Michigan, so that's the middle of the country, the Midwestern state and an important swing state, people want that. They feel like government corruption is a problem. But is that because they've also lived through a pretty corrupt government that shut everything down, and they look at this as an opportunity to finally see in? And that's what I was saying earlier. I think so many of us feel like we haven't seen in. We don't know. This is money coming straight out of our pocketbooks, right? And when you start to hear these things like the workforce diversity in Serbia, and we're like, wow, we're funding that. That's something that I gave money to.
Well, Dave is very partial to transgender dance festivals in Bangladesh, I've heard.
That's right. I mean, there's all of these things, right? and I don't want to...
Sorry, I couldn't help myself there.
I don't want his personal life. I'll let you dress up.
He always busts my time.
But I do think that it's popular amongst conservatives and people, those folks in the middle who are questioning where they stand. I think a lot of people feel politically homeless right now because they feel like there's two sides. And interestingly, on the Democrat side, you have the people that are getting the most attention right now are the Bernie Sanders types, And there are people who are saying, does Bernie have a point that there are these billionaires managing things on both sides of the aisle? But people see that Elon Musk is giving up his time and he's trying to get rid of some of this crazy spending. I think that is driving people to say, what is it? What when you actually peel back the layers of the onion, how ugly is it?
Look, Governor, you're an executive. What do you think of Doge?
I love Doge. I'm from New Hampshire. We don't have taxes. We're the most efficient government in the country. We've been doing Doge for 200 years, right? We made it cool before Doge made it cool. Doge is a good idea, and I think to your point, I think Tudor's exactly right. The average American's like, okay, fine, someone do something.
Is it going to have an impact on
They don't like the messaging. They don't like the callousness. They don't like Elon running around with a chainsaw. They agree we should get rid of 500,000 government workers. But let's understand that's 500,000 families that are going to go. Let's have a little empathy there and understand it. Got to make tough decisions, but don't be callous about it. So it's just the messaging that hasn't been terrific.
Congressman, is it going to have an impact on the deficit other than marginal?
It is marginal, to be honest. I love it. I love what they're doing. And quite frankly, it was called digital services before. This is nothing new. Every executive has always had this ability to cut spending and identify it and get it back. But the fact that we renamed it and glorified it, and quite frankly, it's funny, when Elon Musk was asked what we could do better as Republicans before he's a Republican, he said, I think you guys would benefit from being more compassionate. But the same guy running around with a chainsaw, when some of the people we're laying off are Republicans. They're veterans. They're people that we care about and love. It's a necessary thing to do, but we shouldn't celebrate. I agree with you. We have to be more compassionate. But when you look at the $160 billion that they've saved, some of that's going to be legally challenged, $160 billion. You know how many days that is? What did I say? 4.4 billion per day? That goes away rapidly. It is a drop in the bucket. And like I said, that 1.5 trillion we're going to save over 10 years is a half a year of deficit spending. We have a much bigger problem than just Doge. We have to codify it, first of all. We have to make sure that we make it into law. And we need to be more aggressive, and we're not going to grow our way out of it. We have to get rid of the spending habit we've had.
Is there any chance to apply Doge principles to Medicare, to Social Security? But is there any, I shouldn't say that. There is a chance. Is there an appetite?
Yes, absolutely. And matter of fact, just in Medicaid fraud alone, Florida's the biggest insult to that. But a lot of states have wrapped it up. But Medicaid fraud alone, $300 billion worth of fraud in the next 10 years if we don't wrap this up. We need to make it much harder. We need to make sure we have income verification. We need to make sure that people aren't upcoding. That's just one program. Medicare has some similar issues. Social Security, I don't think it's widespread fraud, but we have to adjust it. Otherwise, we're done. We have to make some hard choices, bipartisan choices like we discussed, but the spending has to be curbed or we're done.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just, Doge might have an outsized, unexpected positive outcome. When they went into USAID, it exposed the spending from the NGOs through the press, through the CIA cutouts, the Atlantic, and right on down, allowing some things to be reported and other things not to be reported, right? And so we learned, for example, that democracy, the definition of democracy was changed when I was in. We learned that 20 million tweets were reclassified as mini cyber events in law so that they could censor 20 million Americans. Do you remember any of this? And so if you don't remember this, look, Mike Benz is the guy on this. So
Yeah.
in terms of raw numbers, so it's not going to be huge. But in terms of saving the republic, in terms of weeding out, and by the way, what they rooted out at USAID, it is related to Bangladesh studies and crazy.
Oh, no, I know. I did not make
bringing
that
down
up.
the United States of America, right? I mean, so this, I'm kind of, I don't mean to make light of it at all, but it was some serious stuff we uncovered by some nefarious folks.
Let's bounce that around a little bit. I mean, there is a deep state. When I first heard the word deep state out of Steve Bannon's mouth, I was like, oh, there goes Bannon again, right? And there's a conspiracy under every rock. But, he was obviously right. There's this sort of infrastructure that was created by big government that perpetuated itself to push a very progressive leftist agenda. USAID was one of that. Elon Musk exposed that. To me, that's one of the great things of Doge. And I want to ask everybody in the panel, I'll start with you, Ms. Dixon, do you think the American people appreciate that? Or do the American people not care? Does it go over their heads? Because this, to me, is a huge story. It essentially robs the electorate of their voice. We have handed democracy to a bunch of insane leftists.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm the best person to answer this because you pointed out I'm new to this. And I did come into this with this naive view of people run for office because they want to do good and they want to serve people. And then you get behind the scenes, you're like, my gosh, this is probably the biggest industry in the entire country. The amount of money that runs through the political machine and the bureaucracy.
And the political machine, just so we make sure, it's not, these are NGOs and government agencies that feed off each other, that perpetuate a progressive agenda. I mean, I sound crazy. I sound like Steve Bannon, but it's true.
No, but that's why you just heard he defunded NPR. I mean, why would we in the media are constantly looking for advertisers and people to make sure we can get our voice out there, but the left doesn't have to because we pay. I don't want to pay to have a leftist agenda put out there. And that's what I know. That's what I see. It's what I can touch and feel and hear on my radio. And then when you dig deeper and you find out that your money is going into the schools in a nefarious way, it's teaching your kids to turn against the parents, all of these things that you start to learn are affecting your family life at home. It goes beyond just the fact that it's taking money out of my pocket. It's changing my kids' minds about who I am. That's when I get mad.
And maybe it comes down to Congressman chipping away at this monstrosity, which is the size of government, the debt, little by little. Okay, NPR is a rounding, not even a rounding error, right? I'm glad he's cutting it. Who needs NPR? I did one NPR appearance, and I wish I skipped it. It's on a book, but
it gives you credibility. You can tell.
I need to sell books, just so you know. Maybe one lefty book, one of my books, but maybe that's the point here. We don't have to solve this problem overnight. We have to chip away at it. And I'll go to you next, Governor, and because I'm pretty sure that's how you handled yourself over the years. Maybe just chip away little by little. Let's get rid of USAID. Let's do zero cost budgeting on Medicare. Maybe we just have to do this and then grow the economy, have tax cuts to grow the economy. You might be able to pull yourself out of this without harsh pain, as long as you don't do a trade war. But anyway, that's another story.
If nothing else, it addresses this mistrust of the government that we're going to spend on something that not only is wasteful, but actually contrary to our whole society. When we're supporting a leftist agenda, when we're supporting communism, when we're supporting people who invade Israel.
And that adds to the budget deficit, by the way.
Right. So not only are we spending to our deficit, to our detriment.
I am getting a
And
rap.
this is the problem. If we can start actually getting accountability and get the trust of people back, it's kind of like when you have the CDC during COVID making bad recommendations, bad science. You lose trust. What's the point?
Yep, I want to hit Governor Sununu, then go to Dave to end it. What do you think? Chip away at it and cut taxes and grow ourselves out?
Good leadership is about you chip away, you be super transparent about it. See, when you're super transparent, people will go along with you with really tough decisions, even if they don't agree with what you're doing, because you're at least being very transparent and very open about it. So by cracking this deep state stuff, by shining a light, the fact that the average American is talking about what an NGO is, and the people didn't even know what non-government organizations were. Now we're talking about it. It's not a myth, it's a reality. And that's what Doge is exposing. So if you're very transparent, you keep chipping away, you have a growth model, and again, you got to make tough decisions and have the political courage to go after things that otherwise you normally don't do.
Finish your thought. I'm sorry. Otherwise,
that's it. That otherwise you wouldn't do, like whether it's Medicare or Social Security.
Yeah, my closing remark will be a response to you in it, starting a trade war. We're in a trade war, and we didn't start it. The rest of the world started it, and we've been the Cub Scout, as usual. Like Tudor just said, I had no idea how corrupt the joint is.
you do know the difference between Sonny Corleone and Michael Corleone in The Godfather. There's a way of doing this.
Watch it with me enough, but yeah,
Okay,
no.
a lot of people get the analogy I'm making here. There's a way of doing this.
The 1999 book, everyone ought to look it up, Unrestricted Warfare, written by two Chinese colonels who are now generals. Go look that up. It'll make your stomach churn. They're at war with us. American people are finally waking up to the war that's been engaged. And if we don't respond, it'll be too late, along with a host of other variables we got.
Just in conclusion, I just want everybody to know I'm not a leftist. I don't like Bernie Sanders.
He's just having
And here's one thing I will say. We just came out of 4 years of the two most dysfunctional politicians running this country. And by the way, you don't have to be a partisan to say that. I can give you hook, line, and sinker. And now we have a president that's fully engaged. And for better or worse, I think better, net, it's going to be an interesting 4 years. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Charlie.